answer for 5 and 7. 5 and 6 is what I meant. Most of you got these correct. And I'll talk about some issues I saw along with everyone. So with number 5 and 6, you should have distributed here. Make sure you're just multiplying 2 to the numerators, not to your denominators. When you do that, you get negative 4/5. Sorry, that was the wrong thing. You get 2/5 m and negative 4/5. And then your 3/5 and your negative 4/5 you can combine to get negative 1/5. So 2/5 m minus 1/5 was the final answer for that one. A lot of you got that, so congrats, put yourself on the back. For 6, same thing, you had to distribute twice though. 0.9 to everything here, negative 0.3 to everything here. Be careful with your decimals. Multiplying, you would have got 5.4t plus 9u. Bring down your minus 4u. This would become a negative 0.9u. This would become a positive, so a lot of issues I saw were we were bringing down a negative, which changed our answer. So a negative times a negative should be a positive 3t. Combine your t's together, combine your u's together, and your final answer was 8.4t plus 4.1u. Yes, Otis.
I got 4.9u.
If it was 0.09, then that would make sense. But because it's 0.9, we got rid of just 10 of it. Or there's just 10 of it left, 0.10 of it left. Okay. Other questions on those two? On your quick check that I did not open. Let's see. Quick tag 8.14. So we're going to go over number 4, and then if you have questions on any others or want to see the answers to any others, we will do that once it loads. So I'm going to work out your number 4, see if you were smashed, if we came up with something different, and then we'll talk about why, if there's any differences. So we should have multiplied 1/4 to both of these. So negative 2/3 b plus 4/20. Now this can be simplified, but we'll do that here in a second. B minus 5/24. We simplify the 4/20, we have negative 2/3b plus 1/5 b. And then we need to combine our b's. They have different denominators. What did we change this denominator to be? Otis? 15. So multiply this by 5, this by 5, this by 3, this by 3. Negative 10/15b plus 3/15b. Then we can combine our b's. Negative 10 plus 3 would give us negative 7/15. b minus 5/24. Neither of these can be simplified more, so this should have been your final answer. Do we have any questions on that one? Anyone get something different and they're not sure where they went wrong? Were there any other questions on this page we wanted to see or go over, or wanted to just check the answer. Hold on to this. This will be another thing that when we do the binder check, folder check, whatever you have, you'll need to have this. Okay, I'm going to pass out. Alright, so before we get into evaluating stuff like that, I want to show you some things on the calculator. We kind of already talked about fraction, but just so you have it, if you want to write it down on your calculator faceplate. To do fraction, remember that alpha y equals. So if you want to write down like the steps, alpha y equals, I'll use sort of this so you guys can have them. Alpha y equals and then 1 or enter to get your fraction bar. Let's say you're doing something in something that's not this screen. If you ever want to go back to this home screen or you click something by accident and you need to get back here, if you hit second mode, so let's do this first. Press just y equals, so it's at a different screen. And then press second mode. Second mode will take you back home. Call that the home screen. These calculators get used a lot, so let's say there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'm just going to type in a bunch of random things. You don't need to do this. And you don't want to see all this. If you hit clear, it'll clear the screen, but it won't actually delete anything, because if you scroll up, you'll still be able to see it. So keep that in mind if you're trying to actually erase it or anything. However, if you want to reset it, and sometimes I'll tell you to reset it, you're going to do this. So everyone press this with me. Second plus 7, 1, 2. Second plus 7, 1, 2. Resets the entire thing. If you have a fraction or a decimal and you want this as a fraction, obviously I just put this in and it gave me that, so I could easily just change it to 5, 6. But I could take this answer, go into alpha y equals, and instead of doing the first one, this very last one changes fractions to decimals. So I could choose 4 instead and hit enter, and it would do that for me. So fractions to decimals is alpha y equals again, but 4 instead of 1. Some other important things. Anytime we need a negative, make sure you're using this button at the bottom, not your minus, unless, so I should rephrase. If there's a negative that comes first, you're going to use this. But if there's like a minus somewhere in the problem, then you would use minus. There is an exponent button. So if you need something squared, you can press this button right above log, log, and it will square it for you. If you want to change that exponent, let's say you hit squared, you could, all I did was press the arrows. You could go up to it and change it to whatever you want, and it will do that for you. Another way you can use exponents is, I call this a caret. You can hit this button for exponents, and it'll leave the space blank, and you can put in whatever number you want. Where is your cube root button? Or where is there a cube root? Otis? I'm sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. Anyone see it? Where the square root is? There's not an actual button for it, but it's somewhere on your calculator. By x squared. So up here it's in blue. I think on your calculator it's in blue as well. Anything in blue you have to hit second before you go to it. So if you hit second and then x squared, you'll get a square root. This does not apply to cube roots. You have to go into something specific to get cube roots. If you go into math, this fourth option is your cube root button. So when you're doing a cube root, we want to use that button, not a square root with a raised to the third power. It will give you something completely different. One other thing that might be important is storing variables. So let's say we wanted to like simplify or solve something and we wanted to check and see if our answer is correct. Let's say I know 2x minus 6 equals whatever. And I want an x to be 3. If I type in 3 and then this STO button, and then I hit x, you can hit x a couple different ways, either alpha and find x, or just hit this button right here, right next to alpha. You can use that as x, and then hit enter. Now every time you put in x, 3 is going to be in its place. So if I do 3x, I'm going to get 9 because it's doing 3 times 3. Those are like general basics. We'll do more calculator stuff as the year progresses. Does anyone have any calculator questions? Where do I find x, y, z? Kendall? How do you do square root? Square root is second x squared. Cube root is math number 4. Alright. If you have any other calculator questions or something comes up or you're wondering where to find x, y, z, just ask and then we will come back to that handbook. I don't have the other thing pulled up. Okay. Before we actually start evaluating, we're going to talk about order of operations. So turn to the second page. But of course I need that open. Here we go. We're not going to do all of these, but just so we are kind of on the same page. So find the page that looks like this. Right, so you may have learned germs, germdas, gemdas, PEMDAS, gems. There are so many different versions of this. But what you need to know is this. G, your parentheses, your grouping, stands for grouping. That could be parentheses, brackets. Usually it's just those two. Maybe it's multiple sets of parentheses or brackets. Then you have your exponents and radicals, either of those. And I'm going to do this here in a second, when I write this out, I like to write the M and the D or the A and the S kind of on top of one another instead of next to one another to show you that it doesn't matter which one you do first. It's whichever comes first, reading left to right. So multiplying and dividing, and adding and subtracting. So when I write, I usually use PEMDAS. I write it like this. So it doesn't matter which one you use. Otis.
Doesn't it work that you multiply before you divide and you add before you subtract?
The order does not matter. It's whichever one comes left to right. Comes first, reading left to right. Now, I will say with dividing, if like everything is being divided, or like in a fraction, you would have to do what's in your numerator first. But there are specific cases for that. Let's see. If we end up doing all four, that's fine. Of these four, which ones do we want to do together? Let's label these 1, 2, 3. Which ones look, you're not sure where to start, or let's do it together. So 3, Lacey, 4. Anyone for 1 or 2, or we feel okay with those?
What is the dot in between the 6 and the -2?
It just means multiplication. So instead of like using parentheses, they actually put a, so they didn't use a dot, but they used like whatever the asterisk symbol is. Same thing. Alright, so we'll do 3 and 4, and then if anyone needs to see 1 or 2, we'll go back and do that. So, do we have grouping? Yes. Now, this doesn't count because it's just one thing inside those parentheses, so we can do what's inside here first. We can't directly subtract this until we get rid of the square root. What is the square root of 16? 4. So you're really close. If we divide it by 2, we get 8. But the square root of 16 is 4. So I'm going to rewrite everything except now this is 4. So now we can do our grouping. 2 minus 4 would give us what? 2 minus 4 would give us -2. So now I'm going to rewrite everything, but now we're going to have -2. Now we don't have any more grouping things, but do we have exponents or radicals? Yes. So we can take care of this, -4 squared. So I'm going to tell you, if you were putting this in your calculator, use parentheses. Some of you may already know what this is, but I'm going to show you what happens if you don't use parentheses. So with parentheses, without parentheses. You get 2 different answers. So what happens there is when you're not using parentheses, it imagines this as -1 times 4 squared, which is why you end up with a negative. So always use your parentheses. I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to continue down this way. So this was a positive 16, so I'm just going to leave that as plus. What would we do next? Times -2, which is -32. So because that isn't negative, I'm going to change this plus to a minus. Instead of doing a plus minus, I'm just going to put minus. Now, order of operations tells us to divide before adding and subtracting, but I need to get rid of my numerator before I can divide. So -2 minus 32 would give us -34. And now I can divide and get data. You're really close. Double check that. 14 would give us 28. 16 would give us 32. Go up. There you go. I know you guys wanted to answer. I just wanted him to get that. Okay, questions on that one? With number 4, we have grouping. We can, first, does anyone know what this is? What those bars represent? Absolute value, yes. Is that what you were going to say? Yes. Do we know what absolute value bars do? Iman? Yes. Do we know the reason why it does that? Jaden?
Negative isn't like it's not an absolute.
It can't be negative. And the reason why is because absolute value measures distance from 0. So whether you're going forwards or backwards, distance is still measured positively. Alright, so we have 2 sets of grouping. The order in which we do that grouping does not matter. We could do them at the same time. We could do them one at a time. That part does not matter. Alright, so we have to do everything inside here as well as everything inside here. So this has 2 things going on. We would need to take care of the radical and the exponent. What is the square root of 36? 6. For now, you guys can just say these out loud. Do we know what 2 to the 3rd is? In this case, we are subtracting, but I'm going to consider this to be by itself. It is 8. So if you weren't sure, you could do 2 times 2 times 2, and that would give you 2 to the 3rd, which is 8. And then 2 minus 7 would give us 5. So it's going to end up being positive 5, but in this case, we're going to leave it as the negative for now. Right? With absolute values, it's still technically grouping until you no longer have the absolute value bars. So we still need to do both of these things. 6 minus 8 would give us negative 2. And because there's nothing else left in the absolute value bars, we're going to say math magic happened, the absolute value bars did its job, and now it's become positive. So we can make the absolute value bars go away. We don't need parentheses because there's nothing else there. Right. Our next step would be what? Negative 2 to the 2nd power. Be careful, again, use your parentheses. What would that give us? Positive 4. Now, in this case, because we have to multiply and divide, if we could divide and we get something that was simplified, so let's say this was 10 instead of 4, we could divide 10 and 5 and get 2 and then multiply 3 and 2, and that would work. But in this case, if we divided 4 and 5 or 3 and 5, we just end up with a decimal or a fraction. So dividing is out, so we have to multiply first. And then always see if you can simplify. Kendall. Which would be the decimal. Which is fine. Either of those is fine. Do we need to see examples 1 or 2? As we are doing the next piece, we are going to need to follow our order of operations, make sure we're showing all of our steps and things like that. Right, let's go back. before we start, does anyone know, and we can do hands for this one, know what the word evaluate means? Hila? Do you know what it means? To the best of your ability, what would you say it means? Say that again. We are going to be simplifying, Otis.
Find the full answer and replace the variable.
So the key word there is replace, substitute, however you want to say that. Devin, what were you going to say?
Solve.
In this case, it's not really solving just because there's not like an equals. We want to save the word solve for when we have an equals. I know it actually says equals here, but that's not the same. Right, so we are really substituting or replacing whatever is given for the variable. So if we did that, wherever you see the variable, we're going to put that in for the variable and figure out what that would be. So this would give us negative 32. We evaluated where n is negative 8 and got negative 32. And that's really all there is to it. Right? A lot of these are more simple, are simpler than others. If you are evaluating with your fractions, make sure you are just multiplying to the numerator. If you need to make this into a fraction, so you make sure you're not multiplying to the denominator, you can. And then always make sure you simplify. Always, moving forward, always. So our final answer for this one would be what? Negative 9. Some of these ones up here may not be as challenging as the ones below, so I want you to look over this entire page and tell me which ones you would like to do together. Which ones you feel like you're not sure how you would start that or continue after you substituted or replace. And when you tell me what it is, you can just read it and then I'll start or circle it. Or any we feel like we would need help with. Otis. These three? Okay. Okay, at the very least, I want to do this one and this one with you guys. So we could do these 4. And then if there's any others, we can go back and do those. Okay, so we'll start at this one. Negative 2 times the absolute value of 4a minus 3b plus 5. Because now instead of just evaluating with one variable, we're doing it twice. Same rules apply. We're still replacing the variable wherever it is. So where a is, we're going to replace it with 4. I like to make my absolute value bars thicker so I know that it's not like a 1 or something else. Anytime you evaluate, put that number in parentheses. That way we know it's being multiplied to whatever. Once you substitute or replace your variables, now it's just order of operations. What would we do first? Okay, we could actually multiply these both at the same time. 4 times 4 and 3 times 6. So 4 times 4 would give us, everyone can answer? 16. And then the minus I'm just going to leave because this is going to become a negative. 3 times 6 would give us 18. Our next step would be so we're going to do that subtract first and then we can do absolute value. So this would give us a negative 2. Is there anything else left to do in our absolute value bars?
No.
What?
Make it positive.
Okay. So nothing, no other operations, but we do need to do that, yes. Because these two things are next to one another, I'm going to change these to parentheses. And then we would multiply and then add. So when we put these numbers in, we get 1. Now, if you want to use your calculator to check yourself, this would be a good way to do this. So we know 4 is A and B is 6. How would that be working? Okay. So in our calculators, we're going to put those in and see what happens. So negative 2. Absolute value bars are in alpha window. When you hit alpha window, it's that very first one, ABS. And then I'm going to use my parentheses, 4 and then times 4 minus 3 times 6. I'm going to come out of my absolute value bars and add 5. And as long as all of my numbers are typed in correctly, I should get the exact same answer. So yes, you could do this in your calculator, but I need to be able to see that you can follow your order of operations and evaluate, put stuff in, and things like that. Anyone need to see those steps again in the calculator or find where anything is in the calculator? For this next one, 2 plus the square root, it looks like a division symbol, but that is your square root, where x is 64. So if we were to put that in,
You're going to get 2 plus 8. And then you're going to add 2 plus 8, and you're going to get 10. It's your final answer.
correct. You could double check that in your calculator. I'm going to wait until we get to like this bottom one to double check. Questions on that one? If you aren't sure what the square root of a certain number is, definitely use your calculator, double check it. For this one, same thing. We're going to put this in, but this is the cube root of 27. Anyone know what the cube root of 27 is? A number that you'd have to multiply 3 times to get 27. Yes.
3.
3 times 3 is 9, times 3 again is 27. And when we simplify, our final answer would be 0. 0 can be an answer, even though it's not. I know that's confusing. Questions on that one? And this last one. Now we have 2. Be careful that you don't switch them. So we're doing 2, this is 2 times the cube root, so if you need to, use parentheses to show that they're different things. This is not 2 to the 3rd power and the square root. So the cube root of 27 minus 3 times 1. What would we do first? Cube root of 27. Which would give us, we just found, is 3. Now in this case, we can multiply both of these at the same time. 2 times 3 would give us 6. 3 times 1, 3, yeah, would give us 3. So we get 3. So I'm going to put this in our calculator so we can double check it. So we have 2 times the cube root, so we need to go into math and then hit 4. If you want to put the parentheses in there, you can. It's have to for this one. And then I put in 27. I come out of the cube root. And then I do minus 3 times 1. And we get 3. The problems on the back are very similar to the problems on the front. They just have different answers. If you are at home practicing this, I'm going to show you some Desmos stuff. If you have your Desmos tip sheet, a lot of this stuff is already on there, so you could pull that out when you're at home and practice this. Really, this is just so you know where these buttons are and how to do it. In your keyboard, you need something square or something raised to a different power. Those are your go-tos. If you're typing, if you hit Shift 6, there's like that little caret that was on your calculator that does the same thing. Absolute value bars are right here. So if you press that, you'll get those. What else? Square root is right here. Cube root you have to find though. If you go into functions and scroll all the way down. There's something that looks like a cube root but has an N. If you put that in, it'll leave a blank space and you can put 3 up there for the cube root. And then whatever else. You can evaluate on Desmos just like we did in the calculator. Fractions, use your dividing button. It'll automatically make it a fraction. Last thing, if you didn't open the keyboard for cube root and square root, if you type in these letters, SQRT, that pops up. Or QBRT, the cube root pops up. So you could type it without going to find it. Do you have any other Desmos things we want to know about? I'm going to give you guys some time to practice. And then I'm going to be passing out your review. As I believe mentioned last class, next week we're going to be going over any review questions you have on Wednesday. And then you'll be taking a quiz, and I'll explain how that works on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we'll be going over that quiz, and then you'll be taking your tests. So I want you guys to practice. Let's do this. On the very last page, there are more complex problems. I want you to try at least 13 and 14, if you want to go beyond that, you're more than welcome to. 13 and 14 is what I'm going to be checking next class. So try 13 and 14. If you finish those and want to keep evaluating in this packet, you can. You do have one Khan Academy for evaluating that is due next Friday. So you have a whole week to do that one. So after you do these two, if you've already done the ones that are due tomorrow, you could work on that one. If you haven't done the ones that are due tomorrow, you could be working on that. Okay? So these two problems, and then whichever Khan Academies you need or want.